Hello, and welcome to Here's the Thing with Robbie and Jose, where we explore relationships through a male and female perspective. With me, as always, is the lovely Robbie.
Hello. How are
Hello.
you?
I am well. I'm doing very well. Thank
The sigh in your voice.
you. No, I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Things couldn't be better for me. So, yeah.
It's just more of the topic we're about to talk
Well,
about.
yeah. This one is the dreaded breakup. So,
Dun dun
dun, dun,
dun.
dun. Yeah. And by the way, we're going to do a two-part series because we think that this is a subject, and we might even do more, just because breakups are such a big part of people's lives as far as
Yeah.
relationships go. Like, unless you got with your childhood sweetheart and never broke up and got married and never had any problems and till the day you died. If that ever
Yeah,
happened, then
good for
you will,
you.
yeah, don't listen to this podcast.
You won't be able to relate.
You will not be able to relate. This is something that you're gonna be like,
But
I
I
don't
think
know,
the
what
other
are
thing
they talking
too is
about?
like there's so many different types of breakup. It's almost like they're never the same. I mean,
Right.
if you've had multiple relationships, most of your breakups are going to be so different. I
Yeah.
mean, it can go all different kinds of ways. So,
Well, and and one of the things that I did want to talk about, or what I equate every relationship to, is it has its own life. Like,
mm,
honestly, it's its own thing,
yeah.
right? It has a beginning and an end, no matter which way it goes. Even
Mhm.
if you do stay together, eventually somebody's gonna pass away.
The ultimate breakup.
Unless you're in the Titanic. But even then, the relationship ended. But yeah, it has a life of its own, and because it has a life of its own, there's certain aspects that kind of mimic just regular life,
Mm.
right? But anyways, we'll get into that. But from the get go, I just wanted to kind of start out with, um, just thinking about breaking up with somebody. So you're with somebody
Mm.
and you're like, yeah, for one reason or the other, and everybody has, let's say it's a deal breaker,
Mhm.
maybe it's the religion thing,
Mhm.
you have two different religions, or you have two different beliefs, or maybe it could be even a political thing, right?
Yeah.
Where you have opposing ideas about politics or whatever, or how you raise children, whatever the case
Mhm.
may be. But something's happening and you're like, okay, maybe I might need to end
I feel
this.
like a big indicator for that is when you start to fight a lot. Like, you know what I
Mm,
mean?
yeah.
That feels like, okay, if you're fighting like every couple of days, like it's almost like you don't want to believe it. But I feel like for me, I've noticed that's like the first indicator because everything's like
Too many fights.
amazing. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you're fighting constantly because
Oof.
one or both people are going to kind of reach their point. If it's just constant, it's not good.
Right.
And every interaction is a fight, every phone call is a fight. That's kind of been my experience. Like, okay, it's starting to,
Yeah, and that when it comes to fights and things like that, it's also, I uh, I would say about 90% of the time, it's not really about whatever it is that you're arguing about.
yeah,
Even if it's like the dishes, right?
yeah,
It's not really about that. It's usually
it's deeper.
there's an underlying, maybe it's consideration or
Yeah,
respect for the other person or whatever. And unfortunately, it just comes out and you didn't do the dishes.
yeah,
Like I've told you 100 times to do the dishes, and you said you were going to do the dishes, and you didn't, and now I'm really, really
yeah. I think that most
upset.
couples maybe don't really communicate the way that they should. But even if you do communicate it, you have to, that other person has to receive it and do something about it because there's a
Yeah,
lot of times where in my experience if things are not good, I may have multiple conversations with my boyfriend like, look, I'm not feeling good and here's why. I
right.
need you to work on these things. And sometimes it's one ear out the other. And
Yeah,
and then it's like, and I think that women, and I think you will agree with me,
oh,
we will put up with stuff for long periods of time. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's almost like we're
well, you
preparing
have your limits
ourselves.
too, I'm
Yeah,
sure,
but I
but
mean, like, we really try really hard to put up with those things. And so, like, it's almost like for a woman, I feel like we put up with it, put up with it, put up with it. And then it's like all of a sudden when we're done, we are done. And it's like, and usually the guy's like, what do you mean? Like, but I don't know, guys don't have as much patience, I think.
yeah, maybe not. I mean, there's feelings involved, right?
Mm,
So there's deal breakers, and then there's feelings involved, and sometimes the two don't. That's where the contemplation comes in. It's
yeah.
like, do I really want to end this, right? Because I'm also of the opinion that there are certain things that you're just going to have to learn to live with the other person,
Yeah.
and no matter what, right? So you have to have
A realistic expectation that you're not
yeah,
going to find someone who's going to be everything.
exactly. And you have to also have that self awareness to say, look, this is the way they are.
Hmm.
And yeah, they might get better, they might progress, or they might change eventually. But A, it's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah.
It'll probably be years before they change. And then B, do I really want to? And maybe they might not change. And if they don't change, then I'm just going to have to live with it. So
Yeah.
can I live with XYZ, whatever that is, right?
Yeah.
They clip their toenails in the bed, they eat crackers. They eat crackers and leave crumbs everywhere
Yeah.
or whatever, and it could be more serious than that. Obviously they can take it for granted, whatever the case may be. But yeah, sometimes you just have to, like, hey, this is just the way they
Yeah,
are.
I think people could typically expect to get 80%. There's the 80-20 rule, right? It's like you're really only going to find someone who's maybe 80% compatible with you. And there are those deal breakers like you're talking about and you have to be like, is this something I can live with long term? And if it's not, if it's a big deal, that's fine. You have your choice, but you're not going to meet that perfect person. Like you have
No,
to accept
and
them.
on top of that, I would say is like, because I hear this a lot from other couples, or whenever I hear people, especially if they just got together. It makes me sick. But they're like, yeah, you know what? They're things that, or excuse me, they are what I'm not.
Mm.
And so they're everything that I'm not. And that's what I love about them. Like, yeah, right now, maybe it seems cute, but later on, it won't be so
I
cute.
don't really listen to anyone in a new relationship. It's like you don't even know. Like, come back to me in like 2 years, and then we can talk. Like, it's like, oh, like he does this thing, he doesn't do the dishes, and it's so funny because we fight. You're like
Yeah.
cute fighting at that point, like,
Yeah, or you're like, yeah, I just have to do the dishes for him. He's just a man. It's
yeah,
like, okay, but yeah,
yeah,
hit me up 5, 10 years from now and see how
yeah.
cute that is, because
You'd be
I
like,
guarantee
this
it's not
dude,
gonna be.
yeah, exactly.
But yeah, and another reason that could come up, and I've never had this. I've had it done to me, but I've never actually. This was not one of the reasons. Was if there's another person. But I
Mm,
kind of feel like that kind of goes hand in hand with the first one, right? If you're already having trouble in the relationship, another person can infiltrate, for lack of a better
yeah,
word, really, really easy,
yeah,
because you're already frustrated in the situation that you're in,
mm,
and it's just human nature,
yeah.
that the grass is always greener on the other side.
Yeah. And we talked about in the past, some guys can see that and they kind of swarm those women. It's like you see them vulnerable and the relationship is crumbling and things like that. I think for the majority of people, if you're really satisfied in your relationship, maybe I'll speak for me. I'm not even looking at I don't even see them almost like
Mm,
other men. It's like if I'm really happy and satisfied, you won't even see that. But yeah, as soon as things get rocky,
mm,
you're kind of like, oh, that guy in the
mm.
copy room. I don't know. I mean, I don't
But the
know.
timing can also be there, right? So let's say
Yeah.
you started dating and you're just at the gate, right? Maybe 2, 3 months into it, right? So you're
Hmm.
exclusive, but there is another person, right? That slightly starts, so you're not too committed, but at the
Yeah.
same time, you're like, okay, should I go ahead and break it off now and explore this other person? Or no, let me just stick with what I got for now. Let's see where this thing goes. So
Mm.
that could happen too. Again, it's never happened to me. I've never broken up with anybody because of another person.
Yeah.
I've had it done to me,
Yeah.
which
Well,
is fine. Like, I
yeah.
get it. Like, if you think that he's gonna make you happy, go for it. I can't fault you for that.
Yeah.
But I will say this: I'm like, I know men, so whatever you think, if you think he's Prince Charming, there's probably about a 99% chance that he's not. Maybe
Yeah.
that's that 1% that he is, but you
And
go
I
right
would
on ahead.
say, yeah, unfortunately, a lot of people will just have both for a while, let
Mm,
that other one run its course. That's, not a good practice, but a lot of people do that. And it's like, but yeah, I mean, when you're having trouble in your relationship, it's gonna look so green on the other side.
yeah,
You can't help it. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, this guy, he's so funny and he's everything my ex isn't. All the
right.
things I hate about my ex, this guy is not. Or, I mean, my current guy, this guy is not. And it's really hard. Your mind is gonna get clouded at that point.
Yeah, and then also, and this is horrible sometimes too. But let's just say you're just not feeling that person anymore. And that happens too. Maybe there's nothing wrong with them per
It
se,
just
right?
kind of runs its course.
Yeah, you just kind of don't feel the same way that you once did towards that person, right? Maybe it wasn't ever really a strong connection, anyways, but there was nothing wrong with them. So you're like, yeah, we'll just go ahead and keep on going. And now you're feeling like, maybe there's something missing. Now, we can sit here and debate on whether or not, like, okay, try to make it work with that person,
Mm.
communicate with them and let them know maybe that the thrill is gone and maybe we need to spice
The
it
thrill
up,
is
or
gone.
the thrill is gone. Even Human Nature, I was listening to Michael Jackson's Human Nature the other day. It's a great song, by the way. But nevertheless, it's weird, right? Because if you don't have those emotions anymore towards that person,
Mm.
even if they've done nothing wrong, like they literally have done nothing wrong, but you just don't have those emotions, sometimes it's time to break it off.
Has it
Maybe
ever
better
happened
for
to
them.
you just all of a sudden, just randomly, you just lost feelings?
Um, I don't know if hmm, I don't know if it's lost feelings exactly, but I think it's changed. Like you said, at the beginning, it's always hot and heavy. It
Yeah.
always is. And then you kind of settle in after a while.
Yeah.
But you have to almost take a practical approach to it because it's not always going to be passionate.
Yeah.
Relationships just in general are not always like, I'm not saying that you have to give in to the fact that, hey, it is what it is,
Yeah.
she's there, I'm here, like, that's it. I'm just saying that it can't always be passionate.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I had a relationship one time where the guy before he started dating me had only had like his longest relationship was like 6 months. It was just like the, whatever. And when we dated longer than that and things started to get, all that stuff starts coming out, it gets a little bit messier and things like that. And he couldn't handle it because you're only used to the best part of it. You haven't gotten past
Well,
the hard part.
that's
So
so
like
addictive too.
yeah, I mean, it is for sure.
Super
But like,
addictive.
if you're trying to judge relationships on like that beginning part, it can't sustain
No,
that. I
no,
mean,
it's very difficult to
yeah,
do, and but I know the feeling. I mean, guys have run through the same thing too,
yeah,
where initially it's hot and heavy, and then it slows down,
yeah,
and then sometimes it comes to a screeching halt, and you're like, what is going on
yeah.
here?
What
And then you
happened?
miss it because I'm assuming, and I'm not a scientist, I'm not
You're not?
I'm not Professor Jose. No, but like, I don't know, there must be something chemically going on in your brain,
Yeah,
and dopamines or whatever that's going on, because it is addictive and you
yeah,
want that. And sometimes um, you're like, how do I get that back? I
yeah.
want that back because it was so exciting. The butterflies in your
Mm,
stomach, the not being able to just, like, there's times, especially in a new relationship, where you can't keep your hands off them. Like, you
yeah,
just want to attack them and just like just go at it and have this wonderful,
yeah,
and you forget about everything else. Well, normally you wouldn't. Maybe it's super hot and it's sweaty, but you know what? Early on, none of that matters.
yeah,
Later on, 5 years from now, it's like, no, it's too hot.
yeah,
Sorry, we're not. I'm sorry. No, we're not gonna do that tonight.
yeah.
I'm sorry. Maybe tomorrow night. I don't know, but it's just I'm not in the mood or
Well, it's
whatever.
kind of the same thing with like when affairs start. That's the most exciting part because
Oh yeah.
you haven't had that butterfly part for so long.
Hmm.
And then you kind of get a taste of that. Like you said, it's very addictive. And like, what do you do? I mean, unfortunately, that's how it
But
happens.
here's the
But
thing, and this is where people need to remind themselves, is that it even if you do get with another person, it's going to run its course too.
yeah,
All of that is going to repeat and rinse. Like
right.
it, you can't avoid it.
But
Like you
it's hard
said.
to see that in the moment, though. You're not
Well,
looking at that.
and so with affairs and stuff like that, and I've had people cheat on me a couple of different times, and for me, I had to try to figure out why that was, and obviously it goes deeper into the relationship and so forth. But part of it as well stems from the fact that it's a fantasy.
Yeah.
That other person, they live in your head. They
Mm,
are not the Prince Charming or the princess that you think that they are.
yeah.
It's all in your head. So you've imagined what this other person is,
Hmm.
and you're running with it. And of course, that's all you're going to see because you've conditioned to yourself to see just the best parts of that person.
Yeah.
But they are just like every other person.
Yeah.
They have their faults. They do things that annoy you. They're going to, all of that happens.
It could be worse.
It could be a whole lot worse. Like, you just don't know. And I would strongly recommend, like, not ever doing that.
But
I've
then,
never done it. I've
yeah.
never done it, but I do know that when you do step out on your partner, there's a certain amount of guilt that goes along with it.
Mm,
You can rationalize it and say, well, I was bad in a relationship and all that, but there is a certain amount of guilt. You also come into the situation where you do realize that the other person is human and they
Mm-hmm.
have faults and they might not be better than what you have at the moment. If anything, it might be worse,
Yeah.
but you've already burned that other bridge. So now you
Yeah.
just got to go forward with what you got.
And sometimes too, like we talk about, like when you kind of feel it, something coming, some people can feel
Mm,
the affair. It's like, wait a minute, something has changed. They're doing odd things. They're not as attentive. Like a lot of people can feel that.
sometimes, yeah. But and that's an interesting point. And I would say that you also have to be very careful not to misinterpret.
Mm,
I think that's when the conversation is really warranted.
mm-hmm.
And I would say, and this is here's the other part that I think people misstep is two things. I think whenever you have a conversation, you should be truthful.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first part. And then the second part is if you do that, then the second part will work. And the second part is you need to believe your partner when they tell you what they tell you. So if you can do those two things, but it all the second is contingent on the first. Because
Yeah,
if
but
you're
people lie a lot, though.
well,
I
there you go.
mean,
I get it. Absolutely. Like lie to me. Sometimes I do want to be lied to. I'm not gonna lie to you.
yeah,
There we have
yeah. You're not gonna lie. Case in point.
I'm gonna tell you the truth. Sometimes I do like to be lied to.
Yeah.
I do like it. I like to hear those things, even when I know that it's. If you're saying that I'm the best lover that you've ever had, I love hearing that. That's okay with me. I will take that, even if it's followed up with, "Hey, these are things that you can do to improve it." I'm all open. Like I'm already good, but you're telling me I can be better. Yay, for sure. Give me that feedback. Let's do that. Um, so I do certain times do like to be lied to little things obviously like that but big things not so much that's and so especially if it's affecting you and there's sometimes and here's the other part let's say you're with a partner and that partner is going through something maybe they're depressed or something
Mm,
you have to be there for them right and be like okay they're going through something
yeah.
it has nothing to do with me but in relationships we tend to internalize and we
Yeah.
seem like well if my partner's not happy then it's got to be me.
You got to have that open communication, because if you are going through something outside of the relationship and you don't communicate that, I would feel the majority of people would think that you're not happy with me.
Right.
It may have not, it could just be work stuff,
Right.
family things, whatever, but you really should communicate that, at
Yeah.
least. Even if you don't want to talk about it fully, just be like, look, this is what, in a nutshell, this
Yeah.
is what's going on at work. I'm dealing with this. Like, but yeah, but you also don't want to obviously accuse your partner of
Right.
stepping out when you don't know. No
No.
one likes to be accused.
No, not at all. Not at all. But the opposite is true too. Sometimes they feel like you're not going anywhere, and that's also that
Ooh,
doesn't feel very good either. Because then the implication there is like you ain't going nowhere. Like I can do whatever I want to because you ain't
I've
going
had
nowhere.
someone say that to me, like, you
Oof.
ain't going, and like that.
Oof. I've had it said to me too, mind
Yeah.
you, and I'm a guy, right? Because I know most of the time it's like, oh, guys can be jerks, and they say that, and
Mm.
the women's, they, yay, they moved on and they're better, and this, but it happens to guys too, where women just take them for granted, and they're like, yeah, you're doing all this, but you ain't going nowhere, so I'm not worried about you stepping out on me.
That's a horrible thing to
I mean,
say
it's not pleasant.
under any circumstance. Like, even jokingly sometimes it's like, I
Yeah,
know you're joking,
but
but
I was gonna say too. So with that, there's two things that come up to mind, right? So if you're thinking about breaking up with somebody for whatever the reason, and obviously there's like a variety of different things. Like there's too many to go into. We just touched on a few. But if you have an open and honest conversation with your partner, and I'm not saying that it's an ultimatum
mm,
exactly, but what I will say is that you have to be, if you're already thinking about breaking up and you're really serious about like, yeah, you know what, I'm really wanting to do this, you should communicate that with the other
yeah.
person. Not because you're trying to scare them or not because you're trying to give them ultimatums or whatever, but you're letting them know I'm not happy in
And
this
it could be
relationship.
something they could fix, and it could work out
It
with
could.
communication.
Now, here's where it gets tricky. This is where it gets really tricky.
Okay.
Once you open up that door, you have to go all the way through it.
Yeah.
Because if you are saying that and you don't mean it,
It's like an empty threat.
exactly. And they will figure that out
Yeah.
really
You
fast.
can't say it every weekend, like, if you don't do this, I'm going to leave you.
Exactly.
But you
Exactly.
shouldn't say it, like you said,
No.
until
Yeah.
you're certain 100%. It's the same thing with the word divorce. Don't say it unless you're ready
Like,
to, you're
yeah.
done.
Like you're on the fence.
Yeah,
And what you do next will determine what I will do.
right.
And once you're, but if you're just not happy and you
Yeah,
just want them to change and you're bluffing,
yeah.
oh man,
Yeah, because I mean, if you
it's gonna
throw
come back to
around the
bite you.
word like divorce all the time, that person, like you said, they're not going to believe that you're ever going to do
Right.
it. And you're just saying it. And it's hurtful each time. Like it
Right.
doesn't feel good. Or
Right.
if you have to constantly pack up your stuff and then you
Then
come back.
unpack.
Yeah, you go sleep at night on your friend's couch and then you're like, I'm sorry. Like it's not good. Like,
You storm out of the house and then you close the door, but
yeah.
I'm never coming back. And then like an hour later, you hear the door knock.
Like softly. It's like,
And you don't say anything. You just walk into the bedroom like I'm going to bed. I thought you left, sucker.
yeah.
Like,
Sometimes she's happy to see you back. Sometimes
I'm
she's
sure,
not.
I'm sure she is, but it's just like again, empty threats are not a, and it's not even a threat,
Yeah.
right? And that's not what I'm saying at all. You should never threaten anybody in any
Yeah.
which way, but you should convey where your head's at
Yeah.
and the fact that you're not as happy as you could be,
Yeah.
and the fact that, and again, it's scary, right? Because it could be that jolt for your partner
Yeah. And I
and be
will,
like, oh, I didn't know, like
yeah, I
crap,
will say too, like when you do decide to sit down and have that conversation, you need to know exactly what it is of why you're not happy. If you sit down and you just say, look, I'm not happy anymore, but you don't have anything else.
right,
Like the other
right,
person, like, well, what can I do? Or what, that happens sometimes. You're
yeah.
like, I'm just not happy. And it's like, well, what is it exactly? And they're like, well, I don't know. I'm not feeling you. Or, I mean,
Yeah, that's what I'm
can't be
saying. Like
too
sometimes
vague.
it could be that they're going through something. They might be
Yeah.
depressed. They like for real might be depressed, and that's a hard thing to do,
Hmm.
especially if they're going through something internally. It has nothing to do with you. They're just dealing with something, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Maybe it's time because when that happens, there's little to nothing you can do
Hmm.
other than just don't be a jerk.
Yeah.
But at that point, maybe it's time to consider possibly getting seeking professional help,
Hmm.
and getting that help for that person because again what you don't want them to is act on that depression, right?
Right.
It's never a good idea. They're not thinking straight or whatever, and so yeah, sometimes it has nothing to do with you, but even at that conversation you should be like, okay, what's going on,
Yeah.
and look, and here's the other part about that, and this is a hard thing. If they are, let's say, not, if in a marriage it's different, so right in this scenario I'm going to talk more about like boyfriend girlfriend, but if they really are going through something and maybe they need to break up with you because that's what they're going through,
Yeah.
you're just going to have to let them go. You just have to. If they're just not happy, you have to let them go, and it's going to be a hard pill to swallow, but there's nothing you can do about that.
Yeah, but like I'm thinking about the person receiving that message. If we were dating and I came to you and said, "Look, I can't be with you anymore because I'm dealing with something with work,"
Mm-hmm.
I would feel that you probably wouldn't believe that because it feels like an easy
Oh well,
out.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, like,
I mean, look, I mean, I'm gonna take it a certain kind of way,
yeah.
sure, and we're gonna get into that, but like just so because it's part of it is you know one aspect of it is you're thinking about being broken up, and then the other aspect is when you're the one that's gotten broken up with and
Mm,
or quote unquote dumped, which is a
mm,
horrible word to be dumped, but but here's the other thing, right? So, and I think the adult way, when you are contemplating, let's say you've already come up with the conclusion that it's just not going to happen.
mm,
Like, I need to break up with them. I've made my decision for whatever reason. Maybe it's personal, has nothing to do with them, but like, I need to be alone for a while, whatever. Now you have to think about all the other things that it's going to impact,
mm.
not least of which, and I know maybe this is just me, for instance, but the, so the first thing that I'll think about is when I'm thinking about the breakup is how is this going to affect the mutual acquaintances that we have?
Mm.
And sometimes that could be, especially if you're older and you have kids and whatnot, because now you're about to break up with somebody and you've introduced them to your kids. And now they're not going to see those
Yeah.
people anymore. So there's an impact. Or if you have mutual friends,
Hmm.
now it's going to be
Or you're
awkward.
close with their family.
Or you're close with their
Yeah.
family. Yes. And I don't know if everybody thinks about it in that term or if they're just more like, hey, I'm just not happy and then I'll deal with that afterward. but I think that would be something that you would think about and be like, yeah,
Yeah, I will say that that would probably deter some people to not ending it maybe so abruptly or kind of linger a little bit longer because it's like, well, we have all these things or whatever, which made me think about like for all the pet owners out there, when you have a pet with some, yeah,
oh my goodness, I didn't even think about the pets.
yeah, this was because I was thinking like,
Fluffy,
yeah, oh, Fluffy, where's Fluffy gonna go, right? So it's
Coco, we're
yeah, exactly. Buttons
oh
and all the yeah,
no,
like when
Snoopy.
you have a pet with a boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever the situation is, when it in like how do you decide is I mean, let's say you got the you
Visitation rights and all
yeah.
that other stuff. You're gonna have to. I don't know.
It's like I mean, people who are love their pets, I mean, they're very, you know what I mean?
So in this situation, you got it together, or like it
Yeah,
was
you got it
like I had a
together.
dog, and then I started dating somebody, and then
No,
all of a
then
sudden they
you would
became really
assume
attached.
that it's you need to take the dog. I
But
mean,
maybe
it's
she takes
still
him to the vet more than I do. It
yeah,
like
like maybe
pampers
she
them, and maybe the dog prefers her more than me. So
yeah.
like, does
I
that
had a
mean?
situation where I was dating someone that had a cat and we got to get so he had the cat, you know, we were together. I was the mommy, you know what I mean? And then
Aw.
when it ended, like even though it was his cat, like it's still hard. Like it was really hard for me to part ways with because, you know, I had taken care of this cat for a long period of time
Yeah.
and things like that. But yeah, when you're dating and you go to the pet shop and you're like, let's go get a puppy. And then you go there and then it doesn't work out. How do you decide that?
Mm, I don't
People
know.
write in, let us know.
That's right.
How do
Somebody,
you decide?
please, here's the
Yes.
thing 214 at gmail.com.
Tell
Let
us,
us know.
please.
Yes. How do you flip a coin?
I
I don't
feel
know. Do
like
you
some
draw
people probably, if you're
straws?
really serious, they probably draw up kind of like if you had kids, like the visitation right kind of contract thing is
Yeah.
like some people are very serious about their pets.
Oh, for sure. It's a like $1 billion industry
Yeah.
when it comes to pets. I had no idea people love their pets
Yeah.
as much as they do.
I mean, we love animals that here's the thing, but
Oh
you know what
yeah,
I
we
mean?
absolutely
Yeah.
do. But like they sometimes people tend to take care of their pets more than they take care of their own selves. Man, it's for real. Like they'll give them insulin shots and everything, and
yeah.
they just spend thousands of dollars to
Be like,
make
oh,
sure that
it's
yeah.
Cookie's birthday party, and you got a little
Yes,
hat, and then you have to invite
yes,
the friends, like the
everything. They
dog
take them to the
friends. That,
groomer and be
yeah,
nice to them and all. I mean, like, and don't get me
puppy
wrong,
spa.
I get it because pets. And then the nice thing, and I never owned a cat before, but I know dogs. They just love you unconditionally. No matter
Yeah.
what, they're always happy to see you.
Have you ever had a
Always.
situation where you had a pet with someone, and then it you had to figure out what to do?
Um, no, but I've had my pet. So got a divorce, and I bought a dog, or we got a dog at the SPCA. And then my son said it was his dog, but I was like, all right, fine. And so when my ex would pick up the kids, they would take the dog with them, which was kind of weird because I was like, I thought it was my dog. At least according to the SPCA, it was my dog because my name is on the paperwork. But somehow I don't
You
have a
are the
dog
father.
anymore. So actually, I've been thinking about getting a like a Yorkie or something. Like I want to get my own dog, something
Oh.
that somebody won't take away from me, so
Well,
that
if
I
you get a
can.
Yorkie, I may steal that dog because they're pretty
They
cute.
are super cute, but I want to get a Yorkie because they're small. I can carry them around, and maybe if I go in somewhere, I
In your
can take
man
them with.
purse.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like they're little dogs, they're
Oh.
little maintenance, and also they make little poopies. So I don't have to worry about scooping up because I have usually large dogs, and those are no fun to
Yeah.
clean up afterwards. But yeah, I mean I don't know. I mean, but
Yeah, I don't know what you do. I mean, I haven't been in a situation where I went with someone when we were dating to go get an animal, but
yeah.
I imagine it's really hard and I mean, like I said, they look at it like the same as children. And
I think maybe depends, right? So if you guys live together, that
mm,
would be tougher. But let's just say that,
why would
yeah.
you get a pet with someone if you don't live with them?
Well, but I'm just saying, like, let's say, let's say you have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, right? So I'll just use myself. Let's say I'm dating a woman,
Mm,
and it's pretty serious. She comes over every weekend or every other weekend, or she spends at least 50% of the time at my place. And I tell her, hey, I want to get a dog. And she's like, oh, okay, we'll go get it together. Right. But it
mm,
stays with me. Now, again, she could help out and takes him to the vet and does a bunch of other stuff. But for the most part, I'm the one that got it. But she's gotten emotionally attached too. So I
yeah.
can't just you know what I mean? So in that case, the majority of the time is, but let's say I have to go out of town and I don't want to kennel the dog, but it's like, hey, can the dog stay at your place? And she's like, yeah, absolutely. I go out of town, do my thing, come back, and you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So in that case, it could be, but that to your point, you better be freaking serious with somebody if you're going to go down that route,
Yeah.
because there's going to be some emotions that go on. But nevertheless, and so the and I guess the let's say you come to the conclusion that you are, and you've already contemplated everything. You're kind of preparing yourself for the the aftermath of the whole thing and all the acquaintances. But now you have to decide, okay, how am I going to do this?
Mm,
Should you do it in person? Should
mm.
you text? Should you call
That's when you
them?
rely on your friends. So like
Friends?
yeah, yeah, because you have to ask your friends, right? Like what do I do? I mean, I think the majority of people would go to their friends if they know it's about to end, right? They'd be like
That's the
looking
best way to
for
do it.
advice. Well, I mean, not just that, but like you would go to them obviously, I think before like, hey, she's doing this stuff and I don't really want to be with her. You're
It's time to break up. How do I do it? I did that to a guy once, and he gave me the worst advice.
pray tell.
So his was the I don't know how to explain it. The coward's way, I think, is the only way. But he basically said, start treating her like a friend, and she won't notice that you guys have broken up. You should just feel like you reverted to friends. And I said, huh, that's a very interesting approach. Unfortunately, it's garbage, and women are way more.
Women, yeah, a woman would not fall for that. Like that is the most
You start high
ridiculous.
fiving her. Hey, she's like, what? She
What's
walks
up,
in.
bro?
Yeah, she walks in the door. You high five. You don't hug and kiss. You're just like, hey, what's up, buddy?
Oh my gosh, that's horrible advice. But I think I mean, for the most
Um,
part, people would talk to their friends, or maybe if you're close with your a parent or something, you'd be like, "Hey, I'm feeling this way. I want to end it. One, is it a good idea?" You kind of lay out the facts, right? And your friends can persuade you in different ways. You know what I mean?
they
Because we hold
can.
their opinion in high regard. So, like, if you were having problems and you came to me, I may say, like, "Well, let's look at this practical, right? Like, what's the real issue? Can it be fixed ever? If no, then you have your answer, right? I would be like
Yeah, but I mean, most people like to. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but most people don't try to avoid. That's a hard conversation. That's a hard
to have
conversation.
with your friend or to tell your
No, to tell your
partner.
partner that you're ready to end it. So yeah, they can tell you, like, maybe they can give you ways to kind of lessen the blow, if you will.
Yeah.
But
I don't like to break up with people. I hate to be the
well,
one to say it. It's the worst.
and I had a friend of mine, and another friend is a different friend that also had the worst advice in the world. So he told me that sometimes he will act like such a jerk that it forces the woman to break up with him so that he doesn't have to do it.
You know what happened? One guy thought of that one time and it worked for him and he told everybody else, "Hey man, this is how you
Just act like a
let her break
complete
up with you is
jerk.
awesome."
Yes, yes, yes. And so that's another coward's way out, but it's a tactic, I suppose. I mean, oh God, that's such a
But
horrible way
all
to do
women
it.
know it too. So if I was dating a guy and he all of a sudden started being like the jerkiest jerk, I feel like a lot of women too would be like, "All right, this guy is just you're starting to fight for no reason and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff."
you're like
But
farting in her face and everything.
Dutch oven her and yeah,
It's
I mean,
horrible. And she was like, you know what? You do that one more time, I'm gonna break up. And you're like, go for it. I'll call your bluff. No, but yeah, it's a horrible, because
yeah,
they do tend to they treat them like really really bad, like
yeah,
garbage, and they just get fed up
yeah.
with it. And you're like, you know what? I'm out. And they're like, okay.
Yeah, but I feel like as far as breaking up, it's like if you're emotionally fueled, that's when you do it in person, right? You're just saying it, you're having an argument maybe, and you just kind of say it. But I feel like a lot of people like to do it over the phone because it's uncomfortable. Like I said, I hate to be the one to say it. So saying over the phone where you don't have to look at that person is probably easier. I've never had someone leave me from a text or an email or I don't
I wouldn't
know.
even know. Like, let's say you did it in person, because I'm trying to think. I've done it. I've broken up with people, but it was most of the time it's been over the phone.
Yeah.
I think. To be honest with you, I get broken up with more than than doing the breaking up. I'm usually not the one that's breaking things off.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I would assume it'd be awkward. It's like afterward, you're like, okay, bye.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes it's good, but like I said, I don't like to be the one to say it. I've always had a problem with that. I just hate that feeling and having to hurt some. It sucks. It's like I've been broken up with a lot, and honestly, for me, it's
Yeah.
better. I like it better.
Well, yeah. Well, and so we'll shift a little bit now. So we've been talking about, the person doing the breaking up,
Mm,
but when you're on the other end of that
mm,
and they're breaking up with you,
mm.
that's when it's slightly different.
Yeah.
Um, and I know that's what we were talking about earlier, is like being dumped or whatever, right? So, but I will say this. So, and this is just me. This is just all me. I don't know if other people do this. If they do, again, write in, let us know. But when I've been dumped, I tend to romanticize the relationship. And when I do the dumping, I don't. I I'm like, no, that was the right thing to do. I don't know if it's just
Because
how
you're trying to
humans
be
work.
okay with your decision.
Yeah,
You don't
maybe
want to
so.
break up with someone and then try to tell yourself they're the perfect person and what did I do and torment yourself
I've
basically.
done them.
I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have, but
I bluffed one time. I bluffed. That's why we were talking about bluffing earlier. And this was with my very first girlfriend. We broke up and got together a few times. We were together for a long, long time. And one time I bluffed and I was like, you know what? It's just over. Maybe we should just call it quits. And she was like, okay. And I was like, oh crap.
that's what I'm saying. Don't say it unless you mean it. You can't take it's no
And
take it back seas. It's none
right.
of that.
And in that situation, she was ready. She was just waiting for you to say it. Now you
Yeah.
said it. And so can't take it back,
She's
which
probably
again,
like me. Like she just I don't want to be the one to say it, man. It sucks. Like not me. It's
again,
on you,
I
bro.
want to bring back the take it back.
Yeah.
Take it back. I wish we could bring that back, but they don't let us.
But do
But
you always romanticize it? I mean, I can understand maybe if you didn't know it was coming, like you had no idea,
yeah,
but
that's when it
like
usually.
but what if it's bad? Like what if the relationship is just toxic? I mean, it's just bad. I mean, would you still
Well,
romanticize it?
the reason I romanticize about it is because even if she's breaking up with me for reasons that have nothing to do with me,
Mm,
I internalize it regardless, right? And
yeah.
we're talking about that earlier, which means that I start thinking about like, man, I could have been better.
We always do
I could
that.
have been better. I could have been better at
What's
this. I
wrong
could have
with
been better
me?
at
Why
that.
doesn't anyone
Yeah,
want me? It's
exactly.
very bleak.
Being rejected is, oh, it's the hardest.
Yeah.
I will say that at a certain point, you do, or you can build up somewhat of a tolerance for it, but I know it's not the same. I know
You're broken it with all the time.
yeah,
Just
pretty
like
much, pretty much. But no, like, and I know I've equated relationships to jobs, and I know it's not the same thing, but coming from a guy that's been told no many a times, I've probably heard no like 95% of the time before I get a yes. Like I get yeses 5%. And this is both at work and relationship wise, mind you. I don't get a lot of yeses. You tend to like, okay, you said no, you move on, you go forward. That's what I'm saying. Like one of the things that I don't do is I don't beg women.
mhm,
I just don't. Because
they've made their
once
decision.
they're done with you, they're done with you. Now,
Yeah.
if you take that approach and you're like, okay, I respect it, you move on, in my experience, they sometimes will come back
Yeah.
and they're like, hey, how you doing? Blah, 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 blah. And it's like, oh, I'm doing good. Like, I haven't heard from you. You're coming out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And it's like, I thought you didn't want to be with me.
I feel
Why are you
like
calling me?
I feel like for
So,
me, if I was in a relationship and the guy came to me and just broke it off, if I really, really cared about the person, I may say one thing of like, kind of like, is there anything that I can do? Like, what's the issue, right? Is it something that's fixable? I may say that
that's like a
one
very
time.
job interview issue.
Well, uh,
Can I do better at my next
I'm
interview?
just saying that like I may make that one attempt if I really want to be with that person,
Mm,
but after that, no, I won't. I won't continue to like I'll accept it at that point. But if I really love you, I may be
yeah,
like, is there any way that we can fix this? If
right.
they say no, then that's fine. You can move on at that point. But I don't know if for everybody they should just like you said with you bluff before, right? I
Yeah.
don't know if just because a woman says it you should be like, okay, fine. Maybe you should, like I said, you judge it on how much you love that person, but if you really love that woman, maybe sometimes women want to hear that, I want this to work, what can I do?
Yeah. I one time I did this and it wasn't a bluff. It still hurt. And she still broke up with me. But I did tell her, I said, look, because she was giving me feedback saying, I'm not happy with the way things are with us, and I want you to be more like this, and I want you to be more like that. And I was genuinely trying. I was genuinely trying to be different, but it wasn't progressing as fast as she wanted it to.
Mm.
And so I did tell her, I was like, look, this is the way I am. I am trying, but it doesn't seem to be at the pace that you want it to. And I'm not saying that I could never change. I'm just saying it's not going to happen overnight. But if you're really that unhappy with me, if you really don't want to be with me, then maybe you should
Mhm.
let me go. And she did.
Bye.
But I think in that situation, I was being as honest as I could. It hurt.
Yeah.
It didn't feel nice, and I wasn't bluffing.
Yeah, you meant what you said, but
Yeah,
it still
I
hurts.
can't. At that point, we're just not compatible. I guess, right?
Yeah.
The funny thing, and this is what and I don't want to touch too much on this because we're going to talk about that in part two. But sometimes in your next relationships, you tend to learn from them, and you sometimes you do become. I've talked to many women that have told me that their their husbands or their ex-husbands used to be a certain way. Like, so let's say they weren't good fathers, and they're like, "Oh, he wasn't a good father. He was horrible." Blah 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 blah. They broke up, and with the next wife, he's gotten better, and he's become a good attentive father.
Yes.
And they're like, "Oh, why couldn't he be that way with me?" And sometimes it's a hard lesson, and
Yeah.
sometimes that happens, and you have to with anything, right? Again, it's a life of its own. When there's a death, um, I'll say this much, right? Not to get too philosophical or biblical or whatever, but there is that or not reincarnation, but there is that sacrifice where something needs to die off
Mm.
before you can resurrect. Maybe it's the phoenix, perhaps. Maybe that's a better
Mm.
analogy, not to get into the religion, but a part of you needs to die off
Yeah.
in order for you to be something else,
Yeah.
hopefully something better. But again, that's we'll talk about that a little bit more.
Can I ask you just real quick because I have the golden question that I'm sure a lot of women have thought about before.
Right.
When we're in a relationship with a guy and we start typical like woman, we would start to have those conversations early on, like, hey, I'm not happy, here's why.
Mm.
You try to talk about it. We will come to you guys over and over and over again with the same thing, just like, please, can you, whatever. Why is it when we do that and we finally had enough and we break up with you, you guys are like, what happened? Like, please
Well,
explain.
the reason why that is because you had said it so much and you never acted on it,
No,
and
no,
we
I'm
didn't
not
believe you.
saying we're going to break up with you. I'm just saying that, like, look, like this thing that you're doing is hurting me and I
Right.
really need you to fix this thing. I'm not saying that the empty threats and
No, no, no,
whatever.
no. That's what I'm saying. That's the reason why is because you always forgave us, and
Mm.
so it turns into a routine. I'm gonna do something bad. You're gonna get mad. I'm gonna say I'm sorry. You're gonna be okay with it. We're gonna move on.
So, should we break up with you the first time that you do this thing?
But that's what I'm saying. If in that situation it's gotten to that point, then you need to tell him, like, look, I am really not happy. And if this happens again, I cannot move forward with you anymore. And then you have to move
But guy,
and then you
you
have to act
guys
on it. So,
still act like you never knew. It's like, well, I didn't know there was a problem. That's the thing that I hear from guys the most. It's like
yes.
if you listen to your woman, she will tell you the things that you need to fix or the key things that are wrong with your relationship, and they always act totally blindsided. It's like they never. That's what I'm saying. It
Because they
feels.
get conditioned. That's what I'm saying. Because it becomes a cycle. And that's the bad part about it. Because if you have, for me, I saw that. So with the girlfriend that I was telling you that I told her like this is the way I am,
Mm,
I didn't want to get into that cycle because I could have very well I knew she cared about me.
yeah,
She said she loved me. So for me, I was just like, if I really wanted to, I could have just said, yeah, baby, I'll be better. I'll keep on trying. I'll keep on trying. And it would have just kept on going on. I'm not going to change. Or if I am, it's not going to be at the speed.
yeah,
So I decided to tell her and save us both a lot of time.
yeah,
Either A, understand that this is the way I am and I am trying, but I'm not going to do it at your speed, or B, you really need to leave.
yeah,
Now, most men won't do that because why? Why would they?
yeah.
Again, if you're going to forgive me and you're going to keep on taking me back, you get conditioned. It's not even that it's an empty threat. It's just part of a cycle that you're used to.
Mm,
I'm going to do something stupid. You're going to get upset about it. I'm going to tell you I'm sorry. We're going to go out. We're going to have makeup sex. And then afterwards, you forgive me. I'll tell you that I'll do better and I might do it for like a week or two. And then I'll revert back to the same thing. And then guess what? Same thing, rinse and repeat. You do it over and
Yeah.
over. So when you do finally say, you know what, I'm done, where'd that come from? You
Yeah.
forgave me 20 times. Now's the time that you're letting me go.
Yeah.
That's when dudes are like, well, are you seeing somebody else or this? I mean, don't get me wrong,
Who's
you're
the
right.
dude?
You've been telling them for the longest time, and you're absolutely right. But people but look, it works both ways, mind you. So if you're a guy, right, and you're not being respected, and you tell your wife like, hey, I don't feel like you're respecting me, this and that, and she just keeps on being with the bad behavior, at some point you're gonna dole out too,
Mm.
because she's not gonna try anymore.
Yeah.
She already sees you as less of a person again, and I know what it feels like where they're like, you're not going anywhere.
Mm.
I got you on my little finger. You are not going. Guys do that too. The version of that is when guys do that, and then they're like, what happened? That's Women do the same thing. They take their person anytime, male or female. You take the other person for granted, and you don't listen.
Mm.
You don't listen. I do listen, again, but there's sometimes when, if that's just the way I am, if that's just the way I am, it's
Mm-hmm.
very difficult for me to change. And I try to be as self aware as possible to let you know. And I've spent enough time by myself to know how I am.
Mm.
I want to be better. I really genuinely want to be better. Listen, and you and I have had this conversation quite a bit. There are things about me that I know that if I were to change would improve my life, especially in a relationship. There's a ton of them, and I really genuinely try, but sometimes it's hard and you revert back to
I
your
feel
old
like a lot of
ways.
guys do that.
It's a default.
Yeah.
It's a default setting. And when you do that, unfortunately, you see it's the same rinse and repeat cycle. It's just with a different woman.
Yeah.
And you almost kind of to a certain point, you're like, oh, we're in this stage of this relationship right
Yeah.
before it ends.
Yeah.
But that's the reason why. So you, as a person, I don't care whether you're a man or you're a woman, there has to be certain things that either you are not willing to put up with, or you have to make peace with, this is just the way it is.
Yeah.
If you're one of those people that I'm not going to tolerate it, because there's people that are like, and me being one of them, because I get set in my ways, and I'm like, hey, this is just the way I am. I'm not going to tolerate any foolishness.
Mm.
Okay, fine and dandy. But you can't turn around and say, why am I by myself?
Yeah.
I can't understand. Why can't I find a woman that wants me exactly the way I
Yeah.
am?
But a lot of people say that though. They may not be self aware enough to know,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, and that's why. And again, we'll get into that. And sometimes the breakup is beneficial
Yeah.
in a weird
Can I
kind of
just
way.
say too, one thing that you mentioned that I just wanted to point out when you said that, like, for guys, like, if you're having these issues and then you're intimate, the guys always think everything's okay.
Mhm.
That is not the case. Just because we are intimate together, even after a fight or whatever, it doesn't mean that the fight is dead. It doesn't mean it's like we
Mm.
forgave you. And I think that
No,
that's. I think a
I
lot
thought
of
we were
guys, no, I think a lot of
good.
guys think like, okay, here's this thing. We're
Yeah,
intimate. We're all good now. No,
yeah, we're good. What are you
no,
talking about? We just had makeup sex
no,
and it was great, and all things are forgiven,
no.
and the dishes are still in the sink. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
exactly.
But again, to that point, you've done that. We've been intimate, and I didn't have to
I know,
change
but I'm
anything.
just saying
I'm
that
just
just
saying you
because
get
we're
conditioned.
intimate with our partner after something like that doesn't mean that we've forgiven
But
and
do
everything.
you see how that can be confusing for a guy?
Yes, but what's the other alternative? Just not being intimate at all for however long?
I'm just saying
It's a
this.
lose lose.
I'm
I'm
just saying
just
this, and I hate to equate men or make this analogy, but since we're talking about pets, if your dog poops in the living room, you don't give him a snack because he's just going to keep on doing it.
but we're the same. We're human. We
I
have basic needs,
I
and we
get that.
still love
I
that
get that.
person at the end of the day. I'm just
I know.
saying that's a
Yeah.
misconception that a lot of guys think. That doesn't mean that we're good.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean
Well,
that.
it doesn't, but I don't know how we're supposed to interpret that.
I'm telling
Well,
you.
yeah, but you're asking us to make a unconnect the two. Like one has nothing to do with the other. And we don't operate in that way. Because if we're having a fight and then slowly the fight starts to die down and we're starting to talk to one another, and then we start like it's slowing down and they're like, hey,
But
baby, I
I'm just
really
saying,
love
if it's
you.
a
I
big
love you too. And
issue,
then you go and have sex.
yeah.
It's hard not to see a correlation
I know,
between the
but
two.
that's not that. That's because we love you and we have this relationship with you. I'm just
I,
saying, when a woman comes to you and says, and not the dishes, but I mean, like, I'm talking about a big deal. It doesn't mean that it goes away. We're still going to be intimate with our husband, partner, whatever, regardless of it. Does everything that can't be perfect all the time?
no,
That
it
means that people wouldn't
can't.
be intimate for who knows how long
It
if things are
can't.
bad.
But there has to be if your partner is not genuinely not doing things that they're either hurting you or they're not doing things that you want, you there has to be some sort of consequences to that. It's just like me saying, I'm dating somebody and I take them over to go meet my mom or my parents, and then afterwards I break up and I was like, why do you think we were serious? It's like, well, I met your parents. Well, that doesn't mean anything. Like it was a get together. I didn't want to go alone. Like, how are you supposed to disconnect the two? You can't. That's what I'm saying. So unless you say, okay, yes, we're gonna have sex, but just understand that I still hate you. Okay, fine. Like, okay, sure. Then maybe in our little
Okay, well,
heads, we're
I'll
like,
say that next time. Be like, okay, we can be intimate, but this by no means means that
yes,
the relation, I mean,
and,
the fight's
and
over.
that could be the case. Like,
Yeah,
yes, this I'm making the distinction between this is not a cause and effect. This is two different things.
yeah,
Like, yes, I'm mad at you, and this is not the end of it. But yes, I'm still human. I'm flesh and blood, and I want to go be intimate with you, and we're gonna go do
yeah,
that. But we're still gonna revisit this. And sometimes, it could, if you do it that way, then maybe sometimes gives them something to think about, and they might be. But it's a conditioning effect, right?
hmm,
It's anytime there's a cause and effect. That's how you condition people to do stuff. That's how you condition, unfortunately, like animals and human beings. They do that test where I don't know if you heard it, where they say a word and then they have like a sour thing, and then the
hmm,
people, and then every time they hear the word,
hmm,
the saliva comes up or whatever. But
hmm.
again, pets are the same way.
Pavlov's theory, is that what it's called?
I think so. I don't know. You're smarter than I am. So.
Well, you're the professor. You said earlier you were a scientist.
But no, but the other thing, and again, after if you're the person that's been dumped or whatever, sometimes you're okay with it. Sometimes you saw it coming and you're like, okay, cool. You get to move forward. A rejection is always going to be hard.
Yeah,
I would say, if and when that happens, you just have to take it in stride, right?
yeah,
And understand that if life has taught me nothing, is that nothing lasts forever.
mm.
The feeling won't last forever. You will find another person. Things change. Your circumstances change.
Well, taxes are forever.
Taxes are, and death will eventually. That's a
Yeah,
certainty too. But there's few and far between that are certainties, and it's very hard not to internalize it when
yeah,
you've been dumped, and to take it from a guy that's been dumped and rejected
yeah,
quite a bit. But and again, we'll talk about that other. That's where you have
yeah.
to have that self love, and sometimes it is a good thing if you've been dumped. Sometimes it's a good idea to they call it a post mortem
Mm.
to reevaluate a few things.
Yeah.
Maybe it was a bad choice to begin with. Maybe now you know better than you did
Or the other
before.
thing too, like maybe if you've always been the person to break up with someone, if you've never been broken up with, the first time you may start to look at yourself of like, okay, what is it that I need to change? And it could change you for the better.
Good,
You
good.
may not realize,
Yeah.
you know.
Being, and it goes both ways, right? If you're the one that's breaking up with somebody, what I will say is this: if you're contemplating breaking up, if there's deal breakers or whatever, I always think it's a bad idea to stay together out of fear,
Mm.
because one of the things that comes into people's heads, I'm sure it's not just me, when you're thinking about breaking up with somebody, is then you start thinking, well, if I break up with them,
Mm.
unless you have a backup already,
Yeah.
you're like,
You got to get back out
I'm
there.
gonna be by myself
Yeah.
for a while, right? Whatever that is, and sometimes you're like, you know what? I don't want to deal with that, so I
Yeah.
just much rather just
I'm
deal with the
sure it
devil I
happens a
know.
lot. Yeah.
It's horrible, and
Yeah.
I would recommend never to do that. If you genuinely love somebody, and you want to be with them, and you really want to give it a go, by all means. But staying together out of fear, resentment is going to start to
Yeah.
fester. You're going to be completely unhappy. the other person might take you for granted. That's where that whole thing of like, oh, you ain't going anywhere,
Yeah.
because they might know your insecurities and might know that you have a fear of being alone.
Yeah.
So they're like, I ain't going anywhere, you
And
know?
most for most people, the main thing in their relationship is their relationship with their partner. So it's going to start to affect all other aspects of your life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because you're with your partner a lot, you see him every day. I mean, depending on the situation, but like it's a big deal.
Yeah.
And so, yeah,
Sometimes you have to do like one of those pros and cons, and that's where friends come in too.
yeah.
Especially if you're really thinking about breaking up with somebody, you can go to your best friend or whomever
Well,
and be
there's
like,
certain friends you can go to and certain ones you probably shouldn't that give you the worst advice, like the example you gave earlier. Like,
well, that
don't
was
go,
the advice I was wanted on how to do it.
but don't go to that
But yeah,
person.
but sometimes you can pro and con it,
Yeah.
and sometimes you're in your own head. And I've been in situations where, because I didn't have that conversation in my head, I thought the relationship was horrible, or vice versa. I think the relationship is great, and then all of a sudden, I don't even see it coming, and they're like, "Hey, I want to break up." I'm like, "Oh man, like I thought we were good." Like being blindsided is another one.
Yeah.
It's another one. If you're not talking to your partner and it comes out of the blue, I don't know how to take that. It darn near destroyed me because I just didn't see it coming.
Yeah.
Just didn't see it. And those are the worst. If you kind of see
Hmm.
the unhappiness, you're kind of like, okay, maybe I
Yeah.
might need
You
to
can
prepare
prepare
myself a
yourself.
little bit, for the impact. But being side blinded like
Yeah.
that, like, oh,
That's what I'm saying. Like with women, we'll put up with it so much, but during that time, we are preparing ourselves.
yeah,
So when usually when the woman's had enough, it doesn't hurt us as bad because it's like we've been preparing ourselves for a long period of
yeah,
time.
yeah.
And I've never done that. I've never blindsided somebody. I would,
Mm,
you know me, I love to communicate as much as I can. I would tell my partner for long periods of time, like, look, I'm unhappy. Here's why. We need to talk about it. We need to work on this. I want to be with you, but these things need to change.
yeah.
And
But I would kind of venture that if anybody is at the point where they really, truly are seriously contemplating breaking off the relationship, they need to communicate
yeah,
that. And they need to also understand that it can't be an idle threat.
yeah,
Because if you do that and they don't change and it's BAU, right,
hmm,
business as usual, and then you're unhappy, you can't get mad at the guy
yeah.
because he's already been conditioned to say, like, yeah, you get angry, I say, I'm sorry, you forgive me, we move on. And yeah, they, for them, they're going to feel blindsided
Yeah,
because it's like, wait a minute, you've done this for 10 years.
yeah.
Now all of a sudden you want to break up with me? Like you've been dealing this 10 years, we've done the same thing over and over and
That's what
over.
women do.
And fair enough, but
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying, like that's why they feel blindsided. But
yeah,
if you say, look, I know I've said this enough, I mean I've said this a lot, and we've gone into this cycle, and you just whatever
hmm,
until you do it. And sometimes what ends up happening is, let's say you break up and they figure out they really screwed up.
yeah,
Sometimes they do want to change again, and you can give them a second chance or a third chance or a fourth or fifth, however many chances you want. But again, just understand that your actions, you can condition somebody to be a certain way. And guys, especially, I'm speaking for myself, where I conditioned my partner to take me for granted. That was on me. That was on me. I should have been better about that, and I should
mm.
have said, like, no, you shouldn't be doing that. But I kind of said, okay, sure, I guess this is what we're doing. And then she ended up leaving me anyway. So what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
But anyways, this is a tough topic. This is a really tough topic, man. We're gonna have our part two. So tune into that one.
It's the
The
aftermath.
aftermath, yeah. So that one probably is gonna be a little more fun,
Yeah.
right? Because this one is a bit. It was tough, but
Yeah.
I think in all reality, in all seriousness, if you're not happy, right, in your relationship, I'm not saying that breakup is the only way to go, but you should not stay in an unhappy relationship,
Yeah.
regardless of what ends up happening. You should, if breakup is that's the only thing that you can see,
Yeah.
then so be it. But if there's other options, by all means. But at the end of the day, nobody. I feel bad for anybody that's in a horrible relationship because that's got to be
Yeah.
just dreadful. Nah, I would much rather be by myself than be in a bad relationship.
Yeah.
all day long.
I think most people would agree. But we'd love to hear from you guys. Please email us. Here's
Yes.
the thing 214@gmail.com. Rate, review, and subscribe.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.